Okay, I think that's most people in, which is fantastic. So welcome to our webinar, the first webinar of 2022. I hope you all had a good new year and a good start to this year. This is the webinar on impact of neurological trauma on bathroom activity. Again, a really fantastic turnout. So once again, really appreciate the support you've given these webinars, and I hope today again you'll get a lot of value out of them, and it adds a little bit to your CPD as well. So first of all, to introduce myself. So my name is Stephen Edwards. I'm the head of sales and marketing for Closomat. I wonder whether we could just move forward a slide, Emma. Whether that's...
Apologies.
There we go. Thank you. And those will know me from my little intro for 1 minute, and then I leave the professionals to take you through the content for the day, and then I'll come back at the end. What I would say is for those who are new to the webinars, or even if those perhaps forgotten, do take use of the chat facility that's usually at the bottom of the screen. It can sometimes be at the top of your screen. And do that throughout. We've got people both from the OT service who are not presenting are there to take the chat as well, but also people from Closomat. So don't feel you can't start the chat while people are presenting, because please do. That's the whole point of these webinars, really. So without further ado, as people who know these webinars, I'd like to just do a couple of polls. So the first poll is hopefully coming up on your screen now, and it's just about prepaid service contracts. So what would be the main reason you would choose to specify a prepaid service contract on a Closomat toilet? So would it be peace of mind for the client? Would it be to ensure the toilet is well maintained and has a longer life? Would it be you must provide this, you've got no choice? Or if there's anything else? And any of the others, please do put that into the chat, as I talked about before. It's always good to understand if it's stuff that certainly we've not thought of as to the reasons why you take a prepaid service contract. So as always, I'll just give you a minute or so, because I know for some of you, if you've not done this before, it'll be a little bit alien to you. So again, good participation rate, which is fantastic. So thank you, everyone. I think overall, looking at the percentages, it's to ensure the toilet is well maintained and has a longer life, which is exactly the purpose of it. And some of you, a good high percentage again of this, the peace of mind for the client, which is perfect. Okay, I think we're nearly done on participation, so thank you for that one. If I bring up the next one. Which is how many prepaid service contracts? So how many are you specifying for? Would you say it was more than usual, less than usual? Perhaps they're all on contracts, so it's neither here or there, or you're not actually specifying at all for prepaid service contracts, which I suspect will be the case for a number of you on the webinar today. Okay. This is quite an easy one for a number of you because it's none, so quite a straightforward answer. But more than a third of you are saying it's all on a contract, so again, that's really useful for us to know. Okay, just some of you still putting your votes in, which is great, so thank you for that. Okay, I think we're nearly there. Brilliant, thank you for that one. And I know putting your in the chat that you also take part in. Which is brilliant. So again, just keep that chat coming. Thank you for that one. And the last one today, so not many for those who've been before, we're used to a few more perhaps. Okay. So future webinar priorities. So thinking of any webinars that we've got coming forward, which of these statements do you agree with the most? So would you like webinars exactly as they are? Would you like them to be more practical, maybe the application on topic less theoretical? Would you like shorter webinars? These tend to be an hour and a bit. And would you like a webinar to cover a specific topic? So again, really, really useful. If there's any specific topics you want us to cover, do put those in the chat and we can pick those up at a later date and hopefully include those in future webinars. I don't know because if you're on the webinar at the moment, but the vast majority of you like the webinars exactly as they are. So that's good to hear. But a number of you liking more practical application topics, less about the theory. So again, we'll look to include those. Somebody mentioned about the introduction to Closomat. Absolutely, will be Ray from Closomat will be on hand later after Emma's presentation to take you through a very short summary of what we do. So hopefully that will clarify that as well. Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that one. Okay, so that's really it from a polls perspective. I'd like to introduce you now to the presenters today. So it's the other way around, but we've got Ray Rochester from Closomat. Those who were on the last webinar will remember Ray, and Ray will take you through the Closomat summary, as I mentioned to yourself before, but it'll be Emma now for the next half an hour or so. He'll take you through the main content for today. And like I said, do keep that chat coming. And at the end of the presentation today, there's an opportunity for a Q&A where everybody comes back, and it's a live Q&A, and we can answer any of the questions you haven't been answered throughout the chat process as well. So don't feel that for something that hasn't been answered, do wait to the end, and hopefully we can feel that then. Okay, so without further ado, I'll hand over to Emma. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, morning everybody. Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm Emma Taylor from the OT service, and I'm going to talk this morning around the impact of neurological trauma on bathroom activity. So the learning outcomes for the session are, I'm going to talk about neurological trauma and how this impacts on occupational performance generally. I also want to talk a little bit around a model of practice to kind of frame how this fits and also how that works with, particularly with around bathroom participation and engagement. Also talk about activity analysis, specifically around toileting, and then think about some strategies around maximising occupational performance and engagement in this particular area. So that's kind of the broad plan for my talk. So when we're talking about occupation, it's something that is absolutely central to what we do in our profession as occupational therapists, and it's our understanding around activities that we need and want to do in order to fulfill our lives. There's a definition there, and it's our ability to understand the barriers that people face in order to achieve these activities. An occupation can be broken up into self-care, leisure, productivity, and also rest and sleep, education and social participation. And often we find that these different categories interchange. So for example, when we do participate in productive activities and leisure activities, we still need to be able to do some of the self-care activities like going to the toilet. So there is an interface between the different types of occupation that as individuals we engage with. And then also as occupational therapists, it's really important that we understand how a person is able to perform these activities that are important to them, what skills and what influences are required for that to happen. So it's about being able to recognise what we need to be able to do to participate, to engage, to perform those particular things. But also if somebody has got an illness or an impairment, how does that then impact on those skills that are required? So how does that then impact on occupational performance? And there are different components to occupational performance. So us being able to carry out these things, we require different types of skills and attributes. So biomechanically, we need to think about range of movement, muscle strength, cardiovascular requirements, our sensory motor requirements. So things like, are we getting the messages to the brain, and can our brain then respond to those messages? Our cognitive requirements to do things, so things like memory, learning, judgment, problem solving, that sort of thing. And then also interpersonal requirements and psychological requirements. So our self-esteem, our mood, our emotions, our motivation, all of these things influence how we perform the occupations that, that are important to us and that we need to be able to do. So that gives us a bit of a broad overview of occupation and occupational performance. So if we then move on to neurological trauma. So neurological trauma is and how that impacts on our occupational performance. Neurological trauma is a sudden injury to our brain, our spine, or our nerves. It can affect any age, so it could be a result of trauma at birth, or it could be a result of a trauma following birth throughout adulthood. And often as a result of a fall, an assault, a road traffic accident. So it's something that has happened to that individual to cause some sort of traumatic event. Now, for the purpose of the presentation, I am going to mainly focus on traumatic brain injury, spinal cord injury in adults. I appreciate that, that obviously these also affect children, but because we've had a previous webinar focusing on paediatrics, I've focused mainly on adults for the purpose of this webinar, although I will make reference to children as well. Okay. So first of all, then, let's look at traumatic brain injury. So traumatic brain injury is an injury to the brain caused by a trauma to the head, which can range from mild to severe. So you might find a person experiences some concussion as a result of the injury, to the other extreme where they have got severe behavioural problems, or they might even be comatose. So the range and the severity of a brain injury will very much depend on the actual trauma and the area that it happened to in the brain. And these again can be caused by lots of different things: road traffic accidents, assaults, falls, accidents at home, accidents at work. And typical symptoms that we might observe in somebody who's got a brain injury could be, and these are examples of symptoms: communication problems. So the communication problem could be a result of different, could be different depending on the type of injury. So it could be a physical inability to speak, or not being able to word find. Or conversely, it could be that a person starts to communicate inappropriately because they don't recognise that they've lost their inhibitions, and so some of the communication then becomes inappropriate. Cognition can be affected, so things like, for example, memory, attention difficulties, perceptual skills, impaired reasoning, lack of initiation, so somebody just hasn't got the ability to initiate activities. It could be that we observe behavioural changes, so they may be disinhibited, maybe impulsive, aggressive, they may be apathetic, so don't want to do anything. Executive dysfunction might be affected, so our ability to have those more complex skills, things like planning, organisation, being able to think more flexibly, being able to multitask and make complex decisions. Emotions can be affected, so we might have we might observe things like personality changes, anxiety, frustration, a sense of loss because of what's happened to the person, or they may be emotionally labile. So emotions can be affected. We might see physical effects as well. So, for example, spasticity, perhaps sensory impairments, paralysis, ataxia. So, whereas some of the previous examples may be less obvious, for some people there may be some more physical evidence of the brain injury as well. Fatigue, people who've had a brain injury often have horrendous problems with fatigue, which can be very disabling. So real brain fog, unable to kind of think and process and make decisions because they are so fatigued. So that's often a problem. And for some people, it can be, it could end up in a person being in a coma, in a reduced awareness state, or a persistent vegetative state. So there's a real variation in terms of the symptoms that a person may present with, depending on the severity and the location of the brain injury. And the thing with brain injury often is that where perhaps there isn't an evident physical disability or impairment, the symptoms and the impairments can be hidden, so people don't always recognise them as being a result of a brain injury. Okay. So if we move on then to a spinal cord injury, a spinal cord injury is just what it says there. It's damage to the spinal cord that temporarily or permanently causes changes in its function, and often because of an external impact. So the damage doesn't necessarily have to be a severing of the spinal cord, but depending on the level of the function, the level of the injury will depend on the functional ability or the functional impairment. And again, it can be caused by car, road traffic accident, it can be caused by an assault, by a fall, lots of different reasons that a person can have a spinal cord injury. And typical symptoms or example symptoms can be numbness, tingling, loss of change of sensation, loss of bladder and bowel control for some people. Some people may find that they have difficulties walking to complete paralysis. And again, that can vary from individual to individual depending on the injury. They may have a weakness or an inability to move different parts of the body. Again, depending on the level of their injury, it could impact on their breathing and also on their sexual function. So different sorts of symptoms. And different types of spinal cord injury. So a spinal cord injury will generally present as paraplegia, so where two limbs are affected, so that the legs are affected, or tetraplegia, where all four limbs are affected, so the legs and the arms. And the injury can be complete or it can be incomplete. So an incomplete injury is where there is still damage, but there's some sensory information still being sent. So some messages are still getting through to the brain, whereas a complete injury, there's no function or sensation below the level of the injury, and basically no messages are getting through. So the person isn't getting any message about the bowel movements or being able to feel the legs or whatever part of the body it is that's been affected. And obviously from the diagram, you can see that the higher their injury, the more parts of the body that are affected, and subsequently functional ability is going to be more and more limited. So damage at the lumbar area is going to result in paralysis of the legs, and then as you move further and further up the spine, further limbs are affected, and potentially breathing if it's a real sort of high sea level injury. I'm sure most of you know this already, but it's just sometimes useful as a bit of a reminder of the different things. So then when we start thinking about occupational performance, these are kind of the symptoms that I've already spoken about, and these are the sort of things that are going to impact on how we carry out those things that are meaningful and purposeful to us as individuals. So our performance, our ability to do the things that are important to us, rely on all these sorts of skills. And if these are impaired because of that injury, then it's likely that that person is going to have some difficulty on some level being able to perform and participate in the activities that are important to them. So to help frame that, I just want to introduce a model of practice. And model of practices are really important to help us understand and articulate some of those influences in a more structured way. So this is the person occupational performance and participation model. Now there is a newer version of this model, but I think this one is a much more simpler way to help understand. And what this model puts emphasis on is around occupation in terms of valued roles and the tasks and the skills that are required to complete the activity for us to be able to perform and participate in them. And what the authors very much see it as is a top-down approach. So what is the overall occupational goal that we're aiming to achieve? So what is it that that person wants to be able to do? And what are the performance skills that are required for them to be able to do that? And we've got the intrinsic factors and the extrinsic factors, which I'm going to talk a little bit more in a moment about. But when a person's had a traumatic injury, the intrinsic factors can be significantly altered, as we've already discussed. And then add that to an environment that might not be quite so conducive to that altered ability, then the occupational performance and participation is going to be significantly reduced. And as OTs, we want to be able to identify what barriers are there that are preventing our clients from being able to do what they want to be able to do, and then work with them to develop strategies to overcome those barriers. And invariably, we're going to get a mix of intrinsic and extrinsic barriers, and our role is to be able to unpick all of that so we can really work out what are the issues. And if we can integrate these and maximise that relationship, then we're also going to look at increasing a person's well-being and their quality of life. So it very much fits with that well-being model that we're always aware of as occupational therapists. So intrinsic factors that influence our ability to do occupations are the physiological, so we've already spoken about a lot of those, are cardiovascular, respiratory, ability to do activities, all the things that go with that, so good nutrition and sleep, all the things that make us up as physiological people. But also our spiritual, our cognitive abilities as well, so all the things that we've spoken about, but also our spiritual factors that influence what makes us up as people. So what is really meaningful to us, what is very individual to us as a person, as well as the neurobehavioral factors, so our motor and sensory input, our balance, our coordination, all those elements. And then the psychological aspects, so our personalities, our individual personalities that influence how we do things, how we approach things, our self-esteem, our self-awareness, our motivation. So all of these things make up those intrinsic elements of what makes us up as a person. And if we then experience some sort of illness or injury, so some sort of neurological trauma, that's going to impact on how we're able to do those activities. And then the model also talks about these external, extrinsic factors, so our environmental factors. So the built environment, which the built environment is often more obvious, but can be a huge barrier. So our home, our built home environment, but also our public spaces. Somebody who has had a spinal cord injury or a brain injury, and is a wheelchair user, for example, the built environment can make a huge impact on whether they're able to participate and engage with occupations in their own homes, but also outside of their own homes. I always think of cars every time people park, particularly in terrace streets on pavements, because there's not a lot of space. That really prevents the person in using a wheelchair to get down on the pavement. So things like that, the built environment can be a huge barrier, but also can be a huge opportunity for people as well if it's built in the correct way. Cultures and values is really important. So in our cultures, in our different cultures and values, what do we find acceptable? What are the norms in our own societies? So, you know, I think we've still got a long way to go in terms of what we find is acceptable. But in the UK, we are generally very accepting of and recognising that people are very diverse and that we value disabled people and people with reduced function. And so there are lots of there's pieces of legislation so that environments are built in a certain way, whereas other cultures this doesn't necessarily happen. So it's recognising, are there any cultural values that might impact on a person's ability to participate. societal and political factors as well. And I think COVID has been a really good example of how things have really changed. So people became very isolated because we went into a whole world lockdown, and that had a huge impact on people's abilities to do the occupations that were important to them, and the impact on the quality of life and well-being. So things like that perhaps are out of our individual control. Social support can be a huge factor. So what sort of support are the people that we're working with who've experienced the injuries, what sort of support are they getting from family, from people, the relationships that they're having with others, and if they've got very positive support, that's going to be much better in terms of engaging with the activities that are important to them. Without that support, it might be harder. And also the natural environment. So this model really recognises the fact that the natural environment can have an impact as well. So things like the terrain, the climate might be relevant. So I've got a client who's got a spinal cord injury who feels the cold a lot more. So we have to really be careful about monitoring his body temperature. So because that can impact on him being able to do things outside. So it's being able to piece the intrinsic elements, so all the things that to do with that individual person, but all these extrinsic factors as well. And how can we identify what the obstacles are, or what the challenges are, to be able to look at strategies to maximise that occupational participation in the middle. Okay. So if we then move on to bathrooms and start thinking about bathrooms and what we do in our bathrooms, and think about bathrooms and occupational performance following a traumatic neurological event. So think personally, what do bathrooms mean to us? If you just reflect on all the activities that you do in a bathroom, because these form a large part of our daily routine, our habits, our rituals. So personally, I have a shower every morning, I brush my teeth, and it's part and part, I do other things, but yeah, in the bathroom, I shower every morning, I brush my teeth, and then I come out and I get dressed. And that's part and parcel of my daily routine. If I don't ever do that, or I can't ever do that, I know I don't feel quite as clean. It's just part and parcel of what I do every day. So think about the routines that you have, think about the routines that people you work with have. It could be that you wash your face every night, perhaps have a bath to wind down, because you know at the end of the day you're going to have a bath and that's your relaxing time. It could be that you're putting the kids to bed, so having a bath, them having a bath is a cue that it's their bedtime. Or if you're anything like my son, you disappear off for an hour with your, back in the olden days it was with your newspaper, it's him with his phone, and I don't see him for an hour because he's gone to the toilet, sitting on the loo, and that's again part of his routine, that's what he does. And think about how does that impact on our occupational roles if we can no longer do those things? So it's not just about the actual doing of the task, it's thinking about how it impacts on our roles and our routines. So if they no longer provide that structure to our days, or if we suddenly have to rely on other people to do things for us, if we need support getting onto the toilet, or if we need support washing, getting in the bath or using the shower, how does that impact on us and our quality of life, our well-being? The other thing it can do is, if someone's had a trauma, a neurological trauma, is that it actually ends up having more structure, because you have to wait for somebody else to come in to support you, to deal with your toileting needs, to deal with your bowel management, to get you in the bath. So your ability to choose when you do those occupations may be affected as well, because you need somebody else to support you with it. And then if we think about, well, what sort of things do we do in the bathroom? What sort of activities do we do? So the sorts of examples that you might do in the bathroom is, you might, we bathe ourselves, and that could be just literally to get clean. You're in the bath, you come in from work, you get in the bath, you get clean and you get out again. Or it could be that you get in the bath to relax and enjoy, have a bit of peaceful time, a bit of quiet time. You could be bathing someone else, so bathing your children. You could be caring for somebody that you're bathing, or showering. You could be bathing with someone else. Having a shower is something that you might do, supporting someone else to have a shower. Brush your teeth, washing your face, shaving, be it your face, your legs, your head, whatever it is you're shaving. We use the bathroom for things like changing incontinence wear or menstruation products, so incontinence pads, sanitary towels, tampons, that sort of thing. And also to put makeup on, it might be an area that you put makeup on. So we do lots of things in the bathroom that when you think about, if you experience a neurological trauma where some of these might be more difficult, then how do we then overcome some of those obstacles, some of those difficulties that a person may experience? So as occupational therapists, we key, absolutely fundamental to what we do is being able to analyse the activity. So when we're looking at occupational performance, we need to understand what is actually involved in the activities that that person wants to be able to do. So as Hagedorn has identified, the analysis of occupations and their use within therapy are the unique skills of occupational therapists. Now, in spite of that, in spite of it being a recognised unique skill, there actually isn't any agreed definition as what activity analysis is. So there's a few definitions there, but fundamentally, it's about being able to break down the activity a person needs to be able to perform and understand what skills are required to do that. So when we are looking at occupational performance, particularly in the bathroom, things like where someone has had a neurological trauma. So if we go back to the previous slides, thinking about what sort of traumatic events, what sort of symptoms might someone have as a result of a neurological trauma, these might be the sorts of problems that they will be having. And if we relate them to bathroom performance, so things like initiation, have they got the ability to initiate to have a shower? If they're lacking that ability to initiate, then they could go days, weeks without having a shower or a bath or a wash. So do they need some support in being able to do that? So understanding if they're lacking initiation, is that going to impact on their ability to use the bathroom to be able to keep clean? What's their attention like? Has that been impaired? So if they start to run a bath, for example, do they get distracted and then they forget it's running? So are they able to divide their attention? So they start running the bath, but then they get carried away with something else. And I think this happens to all of us, but particularly if someone's got a brain injury where that is more significantly impaired, can they then forget that the bath is running? Have they got insight to any of the problems? So are they recognising any of these deficits that they've got that potentially could be at risk? They could be at risk, or it could impact on their ability to do the things that they want to be able to do. Has their memory been impaired? So have they remembered that they've brushed their teeth? Have they remembered that whether they've had a shower? Have they remembered that they need to change their sanitary products, which as females is really, really important because it's got health risks if they don't do that? Have they remembered to turn the shower off when they get out? So memory might impact on it. Planning and processing skills, so do they need to plan ahead? If they need to start thinking about being out and about, do they need to think about where toilets are? If they're out and about, do they need to do a little bit more planning and organisation in terms of what their bathroom toileting needs might be? Have they got any sensory deficits? So can they tell hot from cold? So if they're running the bath, are they safe? Are they going to get into a bath that's too hot because they're not recognising that the hot water is too hot? So it's being able to understand, is that going to impact on their ability to be independent and do things safely? Are there any visual perceptual difficulties? Can they tell when the bath is full? Are they able to recognise when the bath is full and turn the taps off? Are there any proprioception challenges? So when they are transferring or getting onto a toilet, can they judge where the toilet is when they go to sit on it? Have they got any upper limb function deficits? So can they reach to clean themselves after they've been to the toilet? Have they got any lower limb functional deficits? So are they continent? Have they got any continence problems? Can they transfer on and off the toilet? Can they get into the bath independently? Can they get in and out of the shower? And then, of course, The environment, those extrinsic factors that we spoke about with the model, can also have a huge influence. So most bathrooms generally are upstairs if a person lives in a house. So thinking about, can they access it? Is the environment conducive to being able to do all of those things? And how does this fit with the person's norms, routines, and cultural values? I always like to use my dad as an example, because he's in his 80s and he's always had a bath. We got a shower, he would never use a shower. So if he ever experienced a situation where he physically couldn't get in the bath, I'm not sure how he would deal with only being able to have a shower, because he doesn't have showers, he has a bath. That is his cultural norm from childhood, and that is part and parcel of his routine. So all these things are things that we would be considering when we are analysing a person's occupational performance in terms of being able to use just bathrooms when someone's had a brain injury, traumatic brain injury, or a spinal cord injury, and that's just bathroom activity. And I think it's important as well to recognise that bathrooms aren't just things that we use in our home environments. Most of us don't spend all our time at home, although during lockdown we did. And so we need to think about, well, how are our clients going to be able to also access bathrooms, toilets when they're in the community? So if someone has experienced a traumatic brain injury or a spinal cord injury, it's thinking about how do we then support them in making sure that they're able to participate and toilet and use bathrooms appropriately out in the community. So many of our clients may need to start planning where toilets are, something that pre-injury they would never have done before. So if they've got an urgency to urinate, for example, is there a toilet close to where they are? Do they have reduced inhibitions that mean that they need a wee? They just don't really recognise those cultural norms anymore, that they need to find a toilet, and that they just go for a wee wherever they happen to be. For those with a physical impairment, they need to think more about the suitable environment, because this is going to impact on their options. If they're going back to work, is there a toilet that's appropriate for them? Is it shared? Do they need support? If they need support, is there enough space for two? Is there suitable equipment if needed? Community activities, are there suitable toileting facilities? And I've put the map on there for changing places, because changing places is such a fantastic resource to use as a starting point, so people can at least start planning where they might go if they know that there's going to be a change in places, accessible toilet. When they go on holiday, is the bathroom accessible? Often hotels will say they've got an accessible bathroom, but it's just a grab rail and a bath. So understanding that there is significant requirement to plan ahead. And things like just going to a family event, a barbecue, if somebody is unable to access the toilet, that's going to impact on their ability to engage with all of these things. So spontaneous activities that perhaps a person might have enjoyed previously are going to have to be much more planned, or at worst avoided, and then you start thinking about how that impacts on somebody's quality of life and their well-being because of all those factors. So then we've got to think then, as occupational therapists, what approach are we going to be looking at? What strategies are we going to introduce for people to support them? So as OTs, we generally use a restorative or a compensatory approach. We're either trying to look at restoring them back to where they were prior to the injury, or compensating for that injury. Often it's a combination of both. So if it's a child that we're working with, have they already got those skills? Do they need to develop those skills? Do we need to work with that child to support them with those skills? Or are we looking at a more graded approach, working with the client and the wider team to get them as close to that function as they were before? We might start introducing external strategies, so some technology, some smart devices that might help them to think like, have you changed your tampon? Have you turned the taps off? Have you turned the shower off? I had an example of a client who was leaving the shower on, so looking at a timer like you do in campsites, where the water runs for so long and then it will automatically turn off because he was leaving the shower on and running. And then also things like adaptations. So does the person need equipment? Do they need a wash dry toilet? Do they need a dryer? Do they need a hoist? All these things are going to influence our thinking in terms of what strategies we're going to use with a person who's got a spinal cord injury and or a brain injury. And then when we're just thinking about, if I just bring it back to our clinical reasoning, when we are reasoning out what we're going to do with a person, we consider so many different things with our clients. So what is their goal? What is their occupational goal? What do they want to be able to achieve? Analysing that activity and their performance against that. So what can they do? What are their inabilities? What are their limitations? Other people to consider. So what's the impact if we do start making adaptations to bathrooms, for example? How's that going to impact on the rest of the family? Does it impact on their roles? Does it impact on their routines and their social norms? And what do we need to do about that? What were the habits pre-injury? What do they want to get back to being doing? What were their norms? So all of these things influence what we do with our clients when we're trying to come up with a strategy and a solution to maximise their occupational engagement and participation. And I just wanted to finish off by sharing a case study with you of a client who, it was an interesting one, because on face value, you would think, well, on face value, I thought, yes, I can see what the solution to this is. So he was a 40-year-old man, lives with his husband, had a road traffic accident resulting in paraplegia. So it was a kind of a low lumbar spine injury. So upper limb function, but his bowels and his bladders were affected, and he was unable to, he did all transfers, he was unable to, he used all his upper limb to transfer because he wasn't able to stand. So no function from his waist down. Mild brain injury, but that was more around some memory problems, and it wasn't impacting on his function. He was able to manage his own bladder, so manage his catheter, but he was having his bowels managed on the bed. He was overweight, and his transfers, because of his weight, were quite unsafe. So he was doing transfers from wheelchair to bed, but they were quite unsafe. So that was the situation. And then in terms of the different factors that were influencing that, was that in terms of the activity analysis, his goal was to independently toilet. He was very influenced by his husband. So his husband was the one that was saying he wanted him to be able to toilet independently, be able to transfer from his wheelchair onto the toilet. I couldn't quite establish what he wanted. But in my head, I'm thinking, right, activity analysis and what can he do? So he needs to be able to, for what he wants to be able to do, he needs to be able to transfer onto a toilet. He would need to be able to take his clothes off. He need to be able to do a natural bowel movement or have alternative bowel movement that he would use a toilet. He'd then need to be able to wipe and clean himself after a bowel movement and then dress himself. So the questions that were going through my head in terms of those intrinsic factors were, can he have a natural bowel movement? Who do I need to speak to about this? Do I need to speak to district nurses about that? How well can he transfer? So currently he can transfer okay downhill. He can just about do level transfer. Does he understand what skills are required to actually transfer onto a toilet? It's quite complex. So as an OT, my solution was, well, transfer onto a shower chair and wheel over a wash dry toilet, and then actually you've met that need. But because the influence of the husband was very much, no, it's got to be done properly, it's got to be done like this, that was a real obstacle. So the real obstacle there was managing those extrinsic expectations of the partner. So because of that, I'm thinking, right, well, we now need to take a really graded approach to this. So I need to think about looking at, can he have a regime that is sitting on a toilet and managing his bowels? Need to discuss with the district nurse. Need to work with the physio to look at transfers. If I can persuade him to do a transfer onto a shower chair, that would be my starting point, because then we get him over the toilet to see, can he then sit on a toilet and use his bowels? At that point, we can introduce a wash dry toilet which would work well, because then he could be independent. But then thinking about if we're still having to aim towards him then doing independent transfers, which I have to say I think is highly unrealistic, then I now need to think about the position of the toilet. So yes, we can position the toilet for the shower chair to go over, but we also need to think about, well, if he ever did reach that position where he was able to lose weight, he was cardiovascular, much more fitter, his transfers were a lot safer, what position then do we need to think about getting the toilet? Because it would need to be then on a better level for his wheelchair. So it might need to be a little bit higher. Does it need to be height adjustable? Do we need to think about rails? Do we need to think about rails that can be moved out the way, position of the rails, and if he's going to do an independent transfer? So I wanted to use that as an example of where something that perhaps might look quite straightforward in terms of transferring and an activity analysis in terms of him being able to use the toilet actually became quite complex because of all those different factors that became obstacles in achieving that particular goal. So sometimes these things aren't always as straightforward as you think, and it's our skills as OTs, I think, to think about the moment, problem solve in the moment, but also problem solve about the future and all the different scenarios that we might be faced. So I just wanted to use that as an example of someone who's had a spinal cord injury and a mild brain injury to think about the complexities of toileting and the skills of the OT that we have to really think about how we're going to work this out now and for the future. So to summarise then, it's just to kind of pull together that hopefully we've looked at how neurological trauma can present in a range of symptoms. Some are more obvious than others, some are hidden because we can't see, and they're often behavioural, or people might hide them and we don't always see them if we're not with them all the time, and some are more obvious, particularly if you've got a physical impairment, and they can impact an occupational performance in many ways, but being able to maximise that person's performance and participation does require quite a holistic approach if we're really wanting to understand what that person wants to be able to do. And as with most things that we do as occupational therapists, activity analysis and performance analysis and clinical reasoning is really key to being able to achieve occupational goals for our service users. Okay, so that's me. So hand over now to Ray, who's going to talk a little bit more about Closomat and their products. You're on mute, Ray.
My apologies. Thank you very much, Emma. So following that, I'm Ray Rochester, Regional Sales Manager for Closomat, and I just want to spend a few minutes and give you an introduction to the company, which is Closomat, and some of the products and services that we get involved with. So just a few minutes of your time, if I may. So first off, what I wanted to share with you was our company belief. We believe that dignity and independence are fundamental to a person's well-being, and that everyone has the right to live their best life, and we do our best to make that happen. It's part of our core beliefs of the business, and it's something that each and every employee signs up to and subscribes to, and ultimately it is the reason why we do what we do on a daily basis. So what do we do? Well, Closomat manufactures the Vita range of wash-dry toilets, as you all probably know. The most commonly known is Parma Vita. I'll talk about that in a moment or two. But what you may not know is we also get involved in the supply, installation and servicing of changing places toilets, changing benches, hoists, wash hand basins, etc. The list of products which you can see on your screen just now. The company has been around for 60 years this year, and there are over 60,000 wash-dry toilets produced by Closomat in use in the UK pretty much on a daily basis. So the Parma Vita is the most commonly known wash-dry toilet. It is the UK's #1 wash and dry toilet, and it is actually the only wash-dry toilet which is produced in the UK and designed specifically for use by disabled people. Basically, within the Palma Vita range, you can adapt the toilet, you can change the seat type, you can change the height. It's completely versatile and adaptable to suit the particular client's needs, with a number of methods to make it operate, which can mean that there are hands-free options as well as different functions depending on a person's ability. The safe working load, or the weight limit for the client, as you can see on the screen, is 30 stone. You can also change the seat to a Big John seat, which will increase that weight limit to 57 stone. And we do have a 10-year service and warranty option on a product called Palma Life. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes with another slide. So how do we support you in terms of what you do? Well, we try as best we can to take responsibility for everything from you. So we will carry out client assessments, we will carry out specifications, we'll produce specifications, we'll carry out demonstrations, and we'll do surveys. And one thing that is worth noting is our team of assessors, which operate nationwide, are now trusted assessors. They've completed their level 3 assessment. They're about to go on to level 4. So you can actually ask them to go and do the assessment and produce the specification on their own if that benefits you in terms of your availability. We also offer, as you can see, a Closomat no quibble guarantee. That ultimately is about, if you ask us to do an assessment and then it turns out that there's something in that assessment which is not correct for the client, so perhaps we've specified an operating method that doesn't work for the client, or we've suggested that the wrong height is appropriate for the client, then we will go back at no cost to yourselves and make that product right, to adjust it to what the client needs it to be. So it's absolutely no quibble. As soon as the error is brought to our attention, one of our service engineers will go along and make the corresponding situation correct. What we also do within client assessments, whether they be simple or complex, we'll carry that out for you. So we will basically take care of the whole process all the way through. One thing that COVID has introduced to us is to identify a new method of working, as I'm sure most of you have as well. So we'll carry out on-site assessments, which is the traditional method of doing it, but equally we can carry out the assessment remotely using a video call or something similar, and we can carry out the bulk of the assessment that way. Sometimes, if there is a challenging element with regard to installation, we will need at some stage to attend the site to carry out an assessment of the installation criteria. But we are able to work in a number of different ways. If we do have to carry out an on-site assessment, we do carry out a risk assessment prior to attending. All of the processes that are followed at the time of the assessment are COVID safe, following our own internal procedure. And we will, of course, produce for you a written quotation should you need it at the end. We also take responsibility for installation. Obviously, that's relatively straightforward for us to do if we install the product, but we also do, as best we can, take responsibility for installation by third-party installers. We've created an installer training program, so anybody installing Closomat toilets can undertake this training program, take a reasonable test at the end of it, and having passed that test, they will be an approved Closomat installer. But we also do carry out a visit after the install anyway, which I'll talk on in a second, which has been referred to previously as a commissioning visit. Now, commissioning is an old engineering term, which generally, if somebody bought a machine and it needed to be commissioned, that machine could not be used until the commissioning was carried out. In the case of a Closomat, that is not the case. The client should and is able to use that Closomat from the day it is installed. So what we now do is we attend the visit within 10 days of the Closomat being installed. And this is more of a customer care visit. So it's about, how does the client work with the toilet? Is the water temperature okay? Is the water pressure okay? Do you need it to wash for a little bit longer or dry for a little bit longer? And we're more about adjusting that toilet to suit what the client needs it to do, to improve their whole toileting experience using that product. We've made that process a little bit easier in a number of ways, because historically we used to have to wait for the installer to notify us that he's installed a Closomat at a particular address. Sometimes they would send us something in the post and we'd have to wait for the post to arrive and so on. There would be a delay before we actually engaged with the client for the commissioning visit. So what we've done now is, on the packaging and on some parts of the product, we've put a QR code so the installer can scan the code link directly to our website or to our web capture information and fill in the details of the Closomat that's been installed, where it is, the client's contact details. And this is immediately available to our service team to be able to pick up and make arrangements to carry out that customer care visit. So we've done what we can to try and make it a smoother process, a smoother interaction for the client and for the contractor. There's also a big question in the marketplace, and it never really goes away. And the question is about service or warranty. And service versus warranty is a long-standing issue. What we do within Closomat is we provide service warranty packages. We don't provide just a service on a toilet and then walk away from it. We don't provide just a warranty on the toilet, which will take care of any breakdowns. We provide service and warranty. So we will go every year to a toilet that is under contract. We will go every year and we will carry out a service to make sure that product is working in the best condition it absolutely can be. And then for the remainder of the year, if there are any malfunctions or breakdowns or adjustments needed, we will go back and we will make adjustments to that toilet so that, again, the process of toileting for the client is the best it can be, the absolute best it can be. Now, comparing this to the analogy of a car, if you had a car and you didn't service the car, is it reasonable to expect that car will continue to run for the next 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years? It's extremely unlikely that it will. It won't be as efficient. It won't be as reliable. And this is one of the reasons why we carry out a visit to the toilet, is because this toilet is about the quality of life and the toileting that this client will receive from that product. So it's vitally important from our point of view that we service that product each year, we look after it, we protect it, we make sure it's as good as it can be for the client. The added benefit to that is it protects the local authority investment, because the longer that unit is serviced in tip-top condition and works well, the less ongoing expense there will be for the local authority to replace it, which also protects the grant funding, because you're not going to have to find another £3,000 or so to have the product installed. And as long as that toilet continues to work as best it can, it obviously helps from the client's well-being and takes away responsibility, as it says, from you and your contractors to have to keep going back to make sure that particular product is working for the client. Now, I touched on something called Palmer Life a little while ago. Palmer Life is a Closomat toilet, but instead of being provided with a standard 12-month warranty or even a 5-year warranty, which is the most common warranty we supply, it comes with a 10-year warranty. So you have 10 years of annual service and 10 years of warranty cover from the point of installation. And from a cost-effective point of view, it will cost the local authority less to buy Palmer Life up front than it would to buy a product with a 5-year warranty and then add another 5 years. So there are many benefits to your client and to the local authority to consider that package at the start of the process where you are able. So we try and help you as best we can. And once you buy from Closomat, you're done, which is an interesting phrase in itself, but you are actually done with worrying. So we take away from you all of the stress, all of the hassle, all of the frustrations of the process, particularly with our trusted assessors now. You can call us with the client details and say, we think this client needs a wash-dry toilet. Can you go and carry out assessment? We will go and do the assessment. We will prepare the quote. We will take care of the quotation. We will take care of the installation. And with our no quibble guarantee, we will also take care of any issues that occur from the initial supply, as well as then service and warranty going forward. So that was a very, very brief introduction to Closomat. Obviously, there is a lot more to the story, which we'll be happy to share with you on engagement with people as we move forwards. But for now, I'm going to hand you back to Stephen Edwards, and Stephen is going to take you through to the final Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ray. And also thanks, Emma. Both really informative presentations. I know looking at the chat that's come in, sending feedback on Emma's was fantastic. So appreciate you both taking the time out today, and I hope everybody has got a lot from both of those presentations. So a little final thing from me. We have got more webinars coming up. We're doing a slightly different webinar actually on the 27th of April. Hopefully during your lunchtime. It'll only be for half an hour. It will again be CPD qualified, and it's a future-proofing of the bathroom. So you can log on. The log-on process is exactly the same. There's only one other extra bit was just asked for if you are in a local authority, which local authority that is. So please do sign up for this. As I said, it's only half an hour. We recognise that time is precious, so it would be great to see as many people as we can. And the details about that webinar have just been shared by Kirsty now, but we'll also share that with yourselves when we send out the information. I know there's also been a lot of people that have asked about the presentation and CPD certificate, and that will also be sent to you for everybody that attended this webinar today. And you'll also get access to the YouTube video. What I would say to everybody, if you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Closomat YouTube channel, it'll then notify you when there's a new video available, so you haven't got to wait for an email from us. It will automatically notify you. So it'd be great to get you subscribed to our YouTube channel as well. And then the final one is to talk about the next webinar, the quarterly series webinar that we've got, which is on Thursday, as you can see in June on the screen there. It'd be great again to see as many people as we can on that. Do tell your colleagues about it as well. And that's specifically on falls prevention through the bathroom design. So again, the same process there to register, which again, Kirsty has put those details on there. And again, we'll share those with you on the details in terms of giving you the presentation from today and also the CPD certificate. So if you want to find out more, as Ray's already mentioned, do talk to us. You can ring us, but you can also email us at info@closomat.co.uk, and we'll deal with that as soon as we can. There is a live chat facility on the website, a really useful resource from 9 till 5, where you can go on and ask us any question, really. We've got experts on the other end who can deal with any queries you've got, either you've got or your client's got. And of course, there's our website, which has got a wealth of information, including actually access to you being able to register to the webinars that I've spoken about today. So really, the final piece now is to open it up to everybody that's been on from our side today. I will just bring those people up if I can. There we go. So I've seen Emma's back, Ray, Robin, and also Lucy from the OT service. And I suppose really it's just to open it out to you guys. Are there any questions, any Q&As you think was worth sharing? Anything you've not answered that would be worth answering today? Perhaps if I start with Lucy.
I think we answered everything in the chat box. Myself and Emma answered a question regarding whether you would look at toileting for somebody who didn't have the ability to tell when they needed to open the bowels. And both Emma and I replied individually and said the same thing, which is, you know, you would always work towards the client's goals and look at independence and their normal occupations. So the answer is yes, you would still address those issues.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Lucy. Robin, from your perspective, any Closomat?
Yeah, a couple of things. So yes, there is a bariatric version of the Closomat, as Ray alluded to. It's a standard Palma Vita with a Big John seat that turns it into the bariatric Closomat, taking you up to 57 stone capacity. That was somebody's question. Relating to servicing, yes, we offer ongoing maintenance agreements. They're £215 per year. All our prices completely transparently available on our website. Just press the quote button, so all the prices can be seen there. For anyone that wanted to know more about changing places, because that did pop up briefly during Emma's presentation, changing places by Closomat, go to our website. There's a really handy, easy to locate button on the top of the website. Click into that. All the information you'll need. And I do believe that funding has been announced for changing places. So today, as part of the budget announcement. So local authorities will be clambering to get changing places installed all over the place. So make yourself aware of those facilities for your clients.
Brilliant, thank you, Robin. Okay, well, I think we're just over time, but that's brilliant. Again, thanks to Emma and Ray for the presentations today, but also to everybody else, and also for the fantastic chat. There's over 100 chats still on there, so that's fantastic, and appreciate the interaction that you all always give during these webinars. So do take note of the 2 webinars that we've got coming up. We hope to see you then, and if we don't, keep well, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.